I'm going to push back on that a little bit because I
Okay.
saw a lot of people talking about that on social media, but I am actually going to push back on that a little bit. Do I think that the Rams made it look easier? Yeah, I don't think we were ever stressed out at any point that the Rams like weren't playing well, and the Saints this year, they're just a very boom or bust team. They're very hot and cold. Sometimes it looks absolutely terrible, sometimes it looks fantastic. But I will say, although it felt certainly in the second half when you looked at the scoreboard, you went, man, the Rams really have just been controlling this one all the way. And that was true when the game ended. But I think back to 1 minute left in that game, or sorry, 1 minute left in the half,
First half, yeah.
3rd and 5. Derek Carr hits Chris Olave straight in the hands. He drops it. So they're in a situation, okay, they're right at the 50. They're on the Rams side of the line of scrimmage. They go for it on 4th and 5, which you should. That's the right thing to do at that point of the field, and they don't get it. Well, all of a sudden, that game goes from being 7-10, which it was at that point. If Chris Olave just catches that football, you think at the very worst they're going into the half and it's 10-10. They're going to kick a field goal because it's going to get easier and they're probably going to get some more yards after that. So they had a situation where if Chris Olave catches that football, it's 10-10 at the half. And instead, they turn the ball over on 4th down. The Rams have all 3 of their timeouts. They march down the field. They throw a touchdown. And then all of a sudden, it's 17-7. Then the Rams come out and they get points at the beginning of the second half, and it just feels like a runaway after that. But to me, a 10-10 game at half is completely different from a 17-7 game where all momentum then goes completely to the Los Angeles Rams. And this game, although it was, I don't want to call it a garbage time touchdown, but it was kind of a late game effort by the Saints to get that to within an 8-point game. That's basically the swing, right? That's basically the swing that happened when Olave just drops that one pass. So there was a lot more football that had to be played after that. But to me, he catches that football, and who knows what happens throughout this game. So I do think in the end, the Rams clearly won pretty convincingly. People aren't going to really make a big stink about that. But I keep going back to that play as you hear coaches say all the time, 4 to 5 plays are all that stands between winning and losing in a single contest. It's just the 4 to 5 plays where the ball could have bounced the other way, something happens and it doesn't, whatever. And to me, that Olave drop was one of those very, very crucial 4 to 5 plays that could have actually made the game a little bit different. But so I go back to that, and I was going to bring that up at some point on the show. Here we are bringing it up at the top. So I did want to push back on that a little bit, even though I loved how the Rams looked in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true in terms of, even a game like this where, in my opinion, the Rams were a significantly better team than the Saints throughout the entirety of this game. But I think what you're illustrating is even in those encounters, every single game comes down to a few plays here or there. And if they all bounce one way, it can negate all of that, right? Like, you're right. That drive before the half was huge. In fact, those 2 drives, first of all, the Saints failing and then the Rams actually getting some points at the back end of it. On the other hand, like up until that point, it felt like the end of that half only reflected how much better the Rams had been in the first half, right?
That's fair.
The only reason it was close was because they had missed a field goal. They had given up that one big play, right? The big touchdown to Shaheed, which turned what was a comfortable double-digit lead into, crap, it's close again, right? It's like this entire game was the Rams being better for the entirety of it, and then the Saints hitting them with a couple of big plays that reduced the deficit and made it much closer. And then, those sort of instances where they go for it on 4th. I think it was 4th and 5 twice, right? Or at least 4th.
They did, yeah. They had a couple of big 4th down attempts that they did not get in that game.
And they didn't come close on those two. And it sort of felt like that was the correct like natural law like outcome of those plays.
Right.
It's like you haven't earned this play yet, So
yeah.
I get what you're saying. Like it could have been a lot closer than it was, but I feel like certainly when you look at the grading, like the difference between the two teams is pretty stark. I mean, the best thing maybe that the Saints did in this game was their receivers, and the Rams had, a dramatically better performance from Puka Nacua. Demarcus Robinson has a better grade for his performance, catching all 6 passes thrown his way, including the touchdown. I mean, they were just better across the board.
Yeah, and Stafford, I mean, what more can we say about him at this point? He is playing like a top five quarterback in this league. And Stafford's somebody who's had all the arm talent in the world. There's a reason why he goes number one overall coming out of Georgia. There's a reason why he has had so much success throughout his NFL career during his time in Detroit with the Rams, obviously winning the Super Bowl, all that. And, there have been retirement questions with Matthew Stafford over the last couple of years. He's had the elbow injury. All right, he's kind of getting up there in age. He's already got the Super Bowl. Is he going to hang him up? And this year he kind of goes into it. And I wonder if this year was a little bit of a barometer for him of like, okay, if I can't really play to the level that I want to, which is probably something like this, right? Matthew Stafford believes he's a top five quarterback in this league. So if he wasn't able to play this well, maybe he hangs it up after this season. But man, it's the list of quarterbacks playing better than Matthew Stafford, if there are any at all, is very small. And I think that you saw that last night. The arm angles continue to be wow throws. I mean, just how he is reading the field, the confidence that he has in his receivers, the ball placement has been excellent. I think about those plays, not just the ones that he completed to a variety of different receivers, certainly the ones with Puka Nacua and him stuff in the stat sheet. You mentioned DeMarcus Robinson. Cooper Kupp has a little bit of a quiet game stat sheet wise, but I look at those couple of throws that he had to him that were just barely misses that I go, man, I actually liked a lot of the ball placement of where those things were. It just, Cooper Kupp was just mere inches away from being able to catch it. But it was those situations where, hey, either my wide receiver gets it or nobody does. We're living to fight another day. I'm living to throw another down. So just the confidence that he is operating with right now is really, really fun to watch. And all of a sudden, the Rams, who, dude, we went into this season, I don't want to say we, because I don't know, you maybe believe the Rams were a playoff team. I certainly didn't going into the season. But you look at this team, they move on from Jalen Ramsey, and you go, okay, who are the three best players on the team? Oh, that's very easy. All right, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, my Aaron Donald, they're fantastic. And then you go, okay, who's 4 through 20? And you go, I don't know. It's just this mix of players that we didn't think was really going to equate to certainly the record that they have now. And all of a sudden, the Rams have now turned into a team that I wouldn't want to see in the postseason. I wouldn't want to play this team. Certainly the way that Matthew Stafford is playing, the way that Sean McVay is coaching, I wouldn't want to play this team at all. I don't care if it's home, away. I don't care if it's East Coast, West Coast. This team is firing on all cylinders for whatever their cylinders let them fire on, and it's a lot of fun to watch, and we saw it last night.
Yeah, the Matthew Stafford thing is fascinating. This might genuinely be his best NFL season in terms of an individual performance, and he's been doing it all season long. And it's just now he's getting the touchdown rewards. They were talking last night on the broadcast in the post-game show. You look at his run in the last games of number of touchdowns scored, whereas earlier in the season, we kept sort of stumbling into that number of being like, wow, Matthew Stafford's playing amazing. How has he only got like 8 touchdowns in the first half of the year? Because his big-time throw number and rate all the way through the season has been like off the charts good. He's been putting just this highlight reel tape together of absurd passes from start to finish, and now he's getting rewarded with those touchdowns at the end of it. But like Stafford may not have ever played better than this, and it's just that the team around him isn't really a Super Bowl caliber team, so it's not quite as obvious. And obviously with those touchdowns not manifesting earlier in the year as well. Puka Nacua, though, had another game where you were reminded that sometimes the measurables don't actually tell the story, right? And that term sneaky athletic gets used a lot, and it's generally a bit of a joke when it is, but Puka Nacua might actually be sneaky athletic on the basis that he doesn't look athletic, and yet he is. Like I know his measurables aren't amazing, but one of the interesting things was his tracking data, the chip in the shoulder pad type of thing, always highlighted Nacua as actually being, was it a 99th percentile athlete? Like genuinely insanely high. And this is, data that the Rams have access to. But it wasn't something that necessarily showed up on the tape, right? Mm-hmm. Like you think of a guy like Tank Dell, didn't run particularly well. Like 4.49, something like that, like a 4.5 flat essentially for his 40 time. But Tank Dell was always at the top of tracking numbers where you're saying, okay, for whatever reason, the 40 time didn't look great, but his tracking data says he's one of the fastest guys in the draft. And you can see that every time you turn on the tape. Tank Dell looks fast. Even when you watch the tape with Puka Nacua, you don't immediately come away saying this guy is incredibly athletic, explosive, and yet you get games like that and the game before where you see he actually is. When he gets that ball in his hands, he can run away from people, he can beat them in short spaces. He's more athletic than he looks, which means he's sneaky athletic.
I've talked about it here on this show. Confidence is so key to playing every single position. And when you look at Puka Nacua right now, there's so much confidence that he is playing from. And they've told this story on the broadcast about how the second he got to Los Angeles, he was like, give me a playbook, give me Matthew Stafford's phone number, give me Cooper Kupp's phone number, and we're going to go to work. Like, I'm going to be every minute these guys are in the facility, I'm going to be in the facility. Every minute that they are on the football field practicing, I'm going to be on the football field practicing. And it is that work ethic part of who he is as a player that allowed him to, in the 3 to 4 months from draft day leading up to week 1 of the regular season, we have seen all year, there's no hesitation. There's no fat on any of this guy's routes, on his releases, on where he's supposed to be, on what he's supposed to do after the catch. There's none of it. There's zero hesitation. And so that's why, like, when you look at him, you could look at players who maybe are more athletically gifted than him, but he's getting up the field a little quicker. He's getting to the spot quicker because there's just no second guessing. There's no wasted movements at all whatsoever. And you watched last night, man, the tough catches, how he's bouncing off of contact and getting as much yards as he possibly can. People were saying last night that Puka Nacua is an example of, like, you just got to trust the tape. Dude, his tape now is a lot better than what we saw in college. Even if you trusted the tape with Nacua at BYU, even if you liked what you saw at BYU, this version of him being able to do this at the pro level is truly an even better jump and improvement. It's not like we saw this at BYU and now we're seeing it in the NFL. It was, you saw things that you could have liked at BYU, and then he put in the damn work over this offseason to hit the ground running in a way that might end up being historic because he might end up breaking the rookie receiving record. So just the hat is off to him, as much as you could possibly give him his respects for the work that he put in this summer. And that is truly how we got to this point with him, because he worked for it.
Absolutely. He's been phenomenal in that offense and a huge boost to what they can do. I mean, Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp is obviously a dynamic receiving matchup, receiving connection just in and of itself. But you add Nacua to that, now you've got Demarcus Robinson making plays in the red zone. They are a much more dangerous team than they were earlier in the season, and certainly in the offseason when we were just looking at this thing on paper heading into the year. They look fantastic on offense, and I think they are. I mean, I joked before that actually people say all the time this is a team you don't want to see in the playoffs, and I kind of joked that actually I think a lot of the NFC teams would be fine with seeing the Rams in the playoffs. The more they play like that, though, the less I'm convinced that's true, and I think they are becoming that team because that axis of Stafford, Kupp, Nacua, Kyron Williams, there's a lot of scary weapons for teams to have to contend with that.
Right.
Let's spend a little bit of time with the Saints. They did some things well on defense, trying to disrupt that receiving axis we talked about. Their offensive line got wrecked, and it sort of reminded you that actually that's a group that's been problematic for a while. Aaron Donald had a few really big plays, as you would expect. Kobe Turner had some really nice plays. Michael Hoyt was making a bunch of plays. That offensive line didn't hold up, and Derek Carr can't play that well when that happens.